Hey everyone, I never thought I'd have to share this, but I need to talk about what happened before I lose my mind. It all started a few nights ago. Rebecca told me she was heading over to her sister Violet's place for a girls' night. Nothing unusual there, they're super close. Violet just had a baby, so Rebecca has been helping her a lot lately. It wasn't the first time she left late, saying she'd probably crash there for the night. That evening, I settled into my usual routine. I'm not a night owl like Rebecca, so by 10 p.m., I was already half asleep on the couch. Around 11:30, I woke up to a faint sound, laughter. Specifically, Rebecca's laugh. You know how people say you'd recognize your loved one's voice anywhere? That's exactly how it felt. Her laugh is distinct, soft at first, then it builds into this melodic cascade. It's the kind of laugh that makes people turn their heads in restaurants. I've heard it 1,000 times, and I'd bet my life I heard it again that night. But here's the thing, the sound was coming from outside. More specifically, from Will's backyard. Will is our neighbor. He moved in about 2 years ago after his divorce. Nice enough guy. Friendly, always offering to help with yard work or fix something around the house. He and Rebecca got along well, but I never thought much of it. Rebecca is naturally outgoing. She gets along with everyone. Still groggy, I walked to the window and peered through the blinds. Sure enough, there was a figure in Will's backyard, sitting by the fire pit. It was too dark to make out faces, but I saw 2 shadows. One of them was laughing. I stood there for a minute, telling myself I was imagining things. Maybe I'd mistaken the sound. Maybe it was just the TV in Will's house, or some random late-night conversation drifting through the air. But the nagging thought wouldn't let go. That was Rebecca. I grabbed my phone and called her sister, Violet. She picked up on the 3rd ring, sounding half asleep. Hey Sam, everything okay? Yeah, sorry to wake you. Is Rebecca with you? I asked, trying to sound casual. There was a pause. Yeah, she's here. Why? Can I talk to her? Another pause, then muffled sounds as Violet handed over the phone. Sam. Rebecca's voice came through, groggy and annoyed. What's going on? It's late. I froze. My mind was racing. She sounded like she had just woken up, like she'd been there all along. I was sure I heard her laugh outside, but now she was on the phone, miles away. I just wanted to check in, I stammered. Everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine, she said, her voice softening. Go to bed. I'll be home tomorrow. I mumbled a quick okay and hung up. I should have felt relieved, right? But instead, I felt more unsettled than ever. How could she be at Violet's place when I was so sure I heard her laugh outside? Am I losing it? I decided to wait by the window watching Will's backyard. The fire eventually died down, and the figures disappeared into his house. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, Rebecca came home like nothing was wrong. She was cheerful, kissed me on the cheek, and even joked about how tired she was from staying up late with Violet. I wanted to ask her outright, "Were you at Will's last night?" But I couldn't bring myself to say it. Instead, I tried to act normal while keeping an eye on her. And yet, something still felt off. The rest of the week was a blur. Rebecca seemed normal, affectionate even. But I couldn't shake the image of those shadows in Will's yard. Last night, she mentioned another girls' night at Violet's. I nodded, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I felt like I was being torn apart. Before she left, I casually asked, "You're really close with Will?" Huh? She froze for a split second, just long enough for me to notice. Yeah, I guess. Why? Just curious, I said, forcing a smile. She kissed me on the cheek and left. Will's backyard is quiet tonight, but I can't shake the feeling that something's about to happen. Am I overthinking this? Is my mind playing tricks on me? Or is Rebecca hiding something? I don't want to believe it, but that laugh, it's burned into my brain. I don't know what to do. It was around 11 p.m. when I heard it again. Rebecca's laugh. But this time, it wasn't coming from Will's yard. It was coming from the direction of his house. I sat up, every nerve in my body on edge. Our bedroom window was cracked open, and the sound drifted in faintly. Late at night, every noise seems amplified. I followed the sound, moving quietly, my heart pounding in my ears. Listening more closely, I could hear Rebecca's laughter again against the background of a voice I didn't recognize. That's when I decided to call Violet again. I needed to hear her say Rebecca was with her. As the phone rang, I froze. A ringtone. It was faintly echoing from Will's house. The voices in Will's house went silent, and as Violet answered my call, the sound of the ringtone coming from Will's house through the open window also stopped. My blood ran cold. "Sam," Violet answered, her voice groggy. "Hey, sorry to bother you so late," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is Rebecca with you?" "Of course she is," Violet replied, the same calm assurance as before. "She's asleep in the guest room. Do you want me to wake her?" "No, that's okay," I said, my voice tightening. "Thanks." I hung up quickly, my head spinning. Why was Violet lying for Rebecca? And more importantly, why did the ringtone stop playing as soon as Violet answered the phone? I couldn't sit with the uncertainty anymore. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. My feet carried me to Will's front door before I even realized what I was doing. My hands were shaking as I knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, I heard the unmistakable sound of hushed voices and footsteps on the other side of the door. When it finally opened, Will stood there looking surprised and not the good kind. "Sam," he said, forcing a smile. "It's late. What's going on?" "I need to talk to Rebecca," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Will hesitated, his body blocking the doorway. "She's not here," he said quickly. "You should probably head home and—" "Move," I said, my voice hardening. Something in my tone must have told him I wasn't going to back down. He stepped aside reluctantly, and that's when I saw them. Rebecca and Violet were sitting on the couch, their expressions a mix of shock and guilt. They weren't dressed for a casual girls' night. Both were in the kind of attire that left little to the imagination. Heels, tight dresses, makeup that looked hastily reapplied. My heart felt like it had stopped. I stared at them, then at Will, and then back at them. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice breaking. Rebecca was the first to speak. "Sam, it's not what it looks like." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't even try to lie. You told me you were at Violet's. You told me you were asleep in the guest room. And now I find you here, dressed like this? Violet, you too? What are you both doing here?" Violet looked away, her face flushed with embarrassment. Rebecca opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. It hit me all at once. The late-night laughter, the lies, the shared glances I dismissed as sisterly closeness. They weren't just cheating, they were doing it together. "You've both been with him," I said, the realization choking me. "Haven't you?" Neither of them answered, but their silence said it all. Will finally stepped forward, his voice defensive. "Look, Sam, I didn't mean for this to happen. It's complicated, okay? You don't understand." "Don't you dare," I interrupted, my voice trembling with rage. "You don't get to explain this. You don't get to justify what you've done." I turned back to Rebecca, my voice breaking. 8 years, Rebecca. 8 years of marriage, and this is what you do? With him? With my neighbor? And Violet, you were supposed to be her sister. My friend. How could you do this? Rebecca started crying, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I couldn't even look at her. I left without another word. I didn't slam the door or shout or make a scene. I just walked out, my chest hollow and my head spinning. Part of me still can't believe this is real. How do you even begin to process something like this? All I know is the life I thought I had is gone, and I don't think I can ever get it back. I spent the night in my car, parked a few streets away from Will's house. The scene replayed in my mind like a broken record. Rebecca and Violet on that couch, dressed for anything but a girls' night out, their guilty faces confirming everything they hadn't said. Will's awkward attempt to explain. My own disbelief and fury. By the time the sun rose, I was exhausted, but the anger still burned like embers under my skin. Couldn't let it go. I needed to talk to someone, to release the storm inside me. And there was only one person who deserved to know the truth as much as I did. Alan. I parked in front of Violet and Alan's house and stared at the front door, my phone in hand. Calling Alan felt like opening a Pandora's box. Once I told him there'd be no going back, for him or for me. Still, he deserved to know. The phone rang a few times before he picked up. Sam? Hey, what's up? His voice was calm, unsuspecting. Alan, I began, my voice heavy. I don't even know how to say this, but you need to know what's going on. There was a pause, the kind that happens when someone senses something is very wrong. What do you mean? Is Violet okay? She's fine physically, I said, struggling to find the right words. But last night, I found out something about Rebecca and Violet. They've been cheating on us. With Will. The line went silent. For a moment I thought he'd hung up. Then he finally spoke, his voice low and disbelieving. You're joking. I wish I were, I said, my voice cracking. I saw them, both of them, at Will's house, together. They've been lying to us. Alan didn't say much after that. He asked a few questions. When, how long I thought it had been going on. But his tone was flat, like he was processing a blow he hadn't expected. Thanks for telling me, he said finally, his voice hollow. I need to think about this. Yeah, I said softly. Me too. I hung up, feeling a mix of guilt and relief. Guilt for being the one to shatter his world, and relief that I wasn't alone in mine. But, as it turned out, this is not the end of the story of betrayal. Over the next few days, the shock and anger that had been my constant companions began to morph into something deeper. Sadness. The kind of sadness that doesn't just hurt. It drains you. I thought about Rebecca constantly, not as the woman I saw in Will's house, but as the woman I fell in love with. The way she used to surprise me with my favorite coffee when I was working late. How she'd laugh so hard at sitcom reruns that tears would stream down her face. The life we'd built together, the moments that had felt so solid and real, they all felt like distant memories, crumbling under the weight of what I now knew. Violet's betrayal was another layer of pain I couldn't escape. She wasn't just Rebecca's sister. She was someone I trusted, someone who had been a part of my life for years. To know that she had lied to my face, over and over again, made me question everything about our shared history. At first, I didn't think I'd ever be able to face Rebecca again. But as the days passed, a strange sense of calm began to creep in. It wasn't forgiveness, I wasn't anywhere near that. But it was an understanding that I couldn't change what had happened. I could only decide how to move forward. I started making small changes, like boxing up some of Rebecca's things and moving them into the guest room. I went for long walks to clear my head, sometimes ending up in places Rebecca and I had once loved. It hurt, but it also felt like reclaiming those spaces for myself. Just when I thought I was starting to find some footing, life threw another curveball. It was a Thursday evening when I heard a knock on my door. I opened it to find Alan standing there, looking disheveled and pale. "Can I come in?" he asked. I nodded, stepping aside. "What's going on?" He walked in and sat down heavily on the couch, his hands gripping his knees. "Sam," he said, his voice strained, "I've been doing some digging, and there's something you need to know." "What is it?" He hesitated, his eyes meeting mine, filled with an unease that made my chest tighten. "It's not just Will," Alan said finally. "There's someone else." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What are you talking about?" He took a deep breath, like he was trying to steady himself. "Rebecca," he said slowly, "has been seeing someone else. But it's not what you think. It's someone we both know." I stared at him, my mind reeling. "Who?" I demanded, my voice sharp and trembling. Alan hesitated, his gaze dropping to his hands. My brother, he said, barely above a whisper. The room tilted, and I had to steady myself against the arm of the chair. Your brother? I repeated, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Alan nodded, his face pale. Liam. I didn't know what to say. Liam was Alan's younger brother, a guy I'd only met a handful of times at family gatherings. He was quiet, unassuming, and so completely outside of my radar that the revelation felt surreal. Are you sure? I asked, my voice barely audible. Alan nodded again, his expression tight. I wasn't sure at first, but I found texts. Rebecca's name came up more than once. And then there were photos. Photos. My voice cracked, the words sticking in my throat. Alan pulled out his phone and hesitated before handing it to me. On the screen were images, Rebecca and Liam together. At a restaurant. In a car. Even one of them walking hand in hand through what looked like a park. I stared at the images, my chest tightening with every passing second. Why would she? I don't understand. Alan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. That's the thing, Sam. Liam didn't know about Will. And I'm guessing Will didn't know about Liam. She's been playing both of them. The betrayal suddenly felt layered, deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't just about me. It was about how far Rebecca was willing to go, how many lines she was willing to cross. What are we supposed to do with this? I asked finally, my voice breaking. Alan sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, but I thought you deserved to know the full picture. I'm going to talk to Liam. You do what you need to do. After Alan left, I sat in silence, staring at the photos on my phone. The betrayal wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about deception on a level I couldn't comprehend. Rebecca had entangled herself in something so messy, so convoluted, that it left me questioning everything I thought I knew about her. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I paced the house, trying to make sense of it all. Why Liam? Why Will? And most importantly, why lie to me for so long? By morning, the anger I'd been clinging to had begun to fade, replaced by a strange, hollow calm. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Rebecca, not at Liam, not even at Will. I was just tired. But just when I thought I'd found some measure of acceptance, a knock at the door shattered my fragile calm. When I opened it, Rebecca stood there, her eyes red and puffy. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Sam, she said, her voice trembling. We need to talk. I stared at her, every emotion I'd been suppressing bubbling to the surface. Why? I asked, my voice cold. So you can lie to me some more? No, she said, shaking her head. No more lies. Just the truth. All of it. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know whether to slam the door in her face or let her in. But something in her expression, desperation, maybe even regret, made me step aside. Whatever she had to say, I knew it would change everything. Again, Rebecca stepped into the house cautiously, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. She clutched her coat tightly around her, her face pale and streaked with dried tears. The weight of her presence filled the room, pressing against the silence that had become my companion since the night I saw her in Will's house. I didn't offer her a seat, nor did I move from where I stood, planted firmly in the middle of the living room. My arms were crossed tightly over my chest, and my heart was a storm of exhaustion and anger, swirling in equal measure. Talk, I said, my voice sharp and clipped. No more excuses, no more lies. I want the truth. Everything. Rebecca nodded, her lips trembling as she took a deep breath. Her eyes were red, and her face was drawn, but I felt no sympathy. This was a look of regret, but not necessarily for what she'd done. More likely for being caught. Sam, I messed up, she began, her voice cracking. I've messed up more than I can even begin to explain. And I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much right now, but I need you to know it's true. Sorry? I said, my voice rising with incredulity. Sorry doesn't even scratch the surface, Rebecca. You betrayed me. Not just with Will but with Liam too. What the hell were you thinking? Her eyes widened, and for a moment, real surprise crossed her face. Liam? I folded my arms tighter across my chest, refusing to let her feigned shock sway me. Don't even try to deny it. Alan showed me everything. The texts, the pictures. I know about him. Rebecca's face crumpled, and she covered her mouth with her hands. She looked genuinely horrified, but it only served to fuel my anger. Oh my God, she whispered. Alan knows? That's what you're worried about? I snapped, the bitterness in my voice cutting through her panic. Alan knowing? What about me, Rebecca? What about our marriage? Our life? She stumbled back slightly and then sat down on the edge of the couch. Her shoulders sagged, and she looked so small, so defeated, but I couldn't let myself feel pity. Sam, I never wanted this to happen, she said softly, her voice trembling. I didn't plan for any of it. Will, Liam. It just got out of control. That's not an explanation, I said coldly. That's you trying to excuse yourself. Start from the beginning. Why? She hesitated, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. She seemed to struggle with the weight of what she was about to say, but I didn't let her silence last long. Try, I demanded, the edge in my voice leaving no room for evasion. Rebecca looked down at her hands, wringing them nervously. She avoided my eyes, speaking in a voice that was barely above a whisper. Sam, I don't know how to explain it in a way that will make sense to you, but I guess the truth is, I realized something about myself. What's that? I asked, my tone sharp. She finally looked up, her eyes filled with a kind of sadness I hadn't expected. I don't know if you've ever felt like something was missing. Like, no matter how good things are, you can't stop thinking about what else is out there. I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. When I tried being with someone else, just once, I realized that it was something I wanted. Variety. New experiences, she said, her voice shaking. I wasn't looking to replace you, Sam. I needed something different. Her words hit me like a slap. I stood frozen, unable to process what she was saying. A dozen responses burned in my throat, but none of them came out. All I could think was, how could she say this to me? I know what you must think of me, she continued, her voice growing steadier. But it wasn't about not loving you. I do love you. It's just, I've always felt this pull toward something new, something different. And I know that makes me selfish. Selfish, I repeated, my voice barely audible. Rebecca, this is a disaster. She didn't respond, and for a moment, the room was so silent I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. I realized then that the woman sitting in front of me wasn't the same woman I'd married. Or maybe she was, and I'd been too blind to see the truth. You made your choices, I said finally, my voice low and steady. You chose Will. You chose Liam. And now I'm choosing myself. I deserve better than this. We both do. Sam, please, she said, her voice breaking. Don't do this. Don't give up on us. I shook my head, the weight of everything we'd lost pressing down on me. I'm not giving up, I said softly. You did that a long time ago. Rebecca's tears came harder now, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I stood there watching her until she finally stood and walked toward the door. Goodbye, Sam, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Goodbye, I replied, and I meant it. By the time Rebecca left, the house felt emptier than it ever had before. I sat in silence for what felt like hours, letting the weight of my decision settle in. The echoes of her words lingered in the room, but I refused to let them sway me. In the days that followed, I took the first steps toward rebuilding my life. I called a lawyer and started the process of filing for divorce. I told Alan I'd made my decision, and he admitted he was leaning toward the same with Violet. For a while, the sadness clung to me like a shadow. It wasn't the anger or betrayal anymore, just a deep, aching sense of loss. But as time passed, I found a strange sense of relief creeping in. Rebecca's choices didn't define me. And for the first time in a long time, I began to think about what I wanted, what I needed to move forward. The days turned into weeks, and the initial whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal, slowly began to settle into something quieter. I wouldn't call it peace, not yet, but it was a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The divorce process was smoother than I expected. Rebecca didn't fight it. In fact, she barely spoke during the few interactions we had. When we met to discuss logistics, dividing assets, selling the house, she looked like a shadow of the woman I'd known. She apologized again, though her words felt more like an echo than something real. For a while, I kept replaying her confession. Asterisk, I wanted variety. Asterisk, the words lingered like a splinter in my mind. I questioned everything. Was I too boring? Too predictable? Did I miss signs that she was unhappy? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that her choices weren't a reflection of me. They were hers. It wasn't my fault. That realization became my anchor as I began to rebuild my life. I stayed in my house, but I was thinking about exchanging it for an apartment or another house. Alan and I stayed in touch, bonded now by a shared experience neither of us wanted. He ended up divorcing Violet, and though it wasn't easy for him, I could tell he was relieved. I think we both dodged bullets, he said one evening over beers. Painful, messy bullets, but still, I laughed for the first time in weeks. Yeah, I think you're right. Life moved forward as it always does. I focused on myself for the first time in years, something I hadn't realized I'd been neglecting. I even started therapy, something I'd always been hesitant about, but it turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. One session, my therapist asked me, "What do you think you've learned from all this?" I sat quietly for a moment, thinking, "I think I've learned that love isn't enough." "Not by itself," I said finally. She nodded. "Go on. Love needs trust, communication, respect. Without those, it's just words. And I think I ignored that for too long. I wanted to believe everything was fine because I loved her. But I didn't listen to the little things, her pulling away, her excuses. I convinced myself it was just a phase. "Do you blame yourself for not noticing sooner?" she asked. Sometimes, I admitted. But I know it's not all on me. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I tried. And that's what matters, she said with a small smile. The most surprising part of the journey was the realization that I wasn't broken. Hurt, yes. Shaken, absolutely. But not broken. The betrayal didn't define me. It taught me. I learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could rebuild even after my world fell apart. And I learned to let go. Face the truth, no matter how painful it is. Ignoring the signs or holding onto denial only prolongs the hurt. Don't blame yourself for someone else's choices. It's easy to internalize their actions as a reflection of your worth, but it's not about you. It's about them. Let yourself grieve. You're not weak for feeling pain. It's part of the process, and you have to go through it to heal. Find support. Whether it's friends, family, or a therapist, don't go through this alone. Focus on yourself. Rediscover who you are outside the relationship. Build a life that makes you happy, independent of anyone else. Now, months later, I'm in a better place. Not perfect, but better. The pain has dulled to a distant ache, and the memories no longer have the power to break me. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'm ready to face it. As for Rebecca and Violet, I've let them go. I don't wish them ill, but I don't wish them back into my life either. Some scars don't fully fade, but they don't have to define you. They're just reminders of where you've been and how far you've come. Have you ever faced a betrayal that changed the way you see yourself or the people around you? If so, how did you find the strength to move forward? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments below this video. Thank you for your attention, and bye.